My song, As Junk, ended up on a solo album, as did George's. John's, backed up only by George, was too annoying to put it kindly. My unwillingness to include it required a Jubilee sacrifice, and George's loss also. Chapter 46. I Am the Grey Seal. You must realise by now that after Paul died, he was always on our minds. In addition to all of our songs that can be easily recognised as pointing to his death, you can tell that all of us were always under his influence, even when our writing had nothing to do with him. Everybody intended to create more than Paul tributes. However, he was so entrenched in our thinking that even when we all wanted to write about something else, we would each think of great lines that put Paul in it. It was not that we sat down to write about Paul, but no matter where we go with a lyric, Paul is there. Even though we worked on other ideas, double-meaning lines would emerge to say that Paul is dead. Elton John's album Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was written that way. It was not intended to focus on losing Paul, but was written soon after John told Elton and Bernie about it. It was in their heads. Let It Be was released soon after I announced our breakup. 5 months later was the first pop hit by Elton John. Beatle John called Elton's song the first new thing that's happened since we happened. Virtually every critic praised it. Rolling Stone called it a pretty McCartney-esque ballad. This hit was Elton's Your Song. When I first heard it on the radio, I imagined a boy singing it to a girl, telling her, "Remember, this song's for you, it's your song." The lyrics by Bernie Taupin sounded like that. Your Song, however, was actually about Bernie's feelings toward Elton, who could tell everybody it's his song. It's Elton's song. Bernie hopes he does not mind singing about himself instead of about an imaginary girl. Being impressed with Elton's song, Beatle John decided to meet him. They met, but were not close friends right away. The friendship grew a couple of years before John and Yoko confided in Bernie and Elton about Paul's death and about working with me. Those remarks were unfavourable, being when John and I were not as close as we had been, or as we have been since. The talk of lyrical clues, telling Elton why the walrus was Paul and pointing to evidence, would have sufficed. He did not need to tell them that I was not as great in the Paul role as was the earlier Paul. It prejudiced them. Soon after John and Yoko revealed all to Elton and Bernie, Bernie began working on lyrics for their Goodbye Yellow Brick Road album. With Bernie's lyrics, Elton wrote the music. The album begins with a haunting funeral for a friend. It was not for a real one, or for Paul necessarily, but was inspired by John losing Paul, who whispers to me from the grave. Until you see it that way, you can't understand the double meanings that surface in the album. Since only one of the songs was specifically written about Paul, I won't provide the other lines with Paul allusions. However, if you go through the album looking for them, you'll be surprised. Still, all such allusions are only secondary to the primary message of each song. Most of them are not actually songs about Paul. That's an important distinction. When the Stones, Donovan and The Who did their Paul songs, they are among their greatest hits. Not so with Elton's Paul song, but it's worth mentioning. Adding to John's walrus metaphor, I am not the true walrus but a grey seal. I'm allegedly undeserving of the praise fitting the real Paul. Bernie's view of me was a grey seal that's too little for such a large walrus role. His view has long since improved, was at that time based on John's insults about me. As John and I became close again over time, I also became closer to Elton, Bernie and others to whom John had ranted. They all came around eventually. Making references to our songs about rain and to Good Day Sunshine, Bernie then calls Paul a sun to say that the one on the screen, that's me in the image of Paul, is not as bright as the real one, Paul. He says that if anyone can cry for Paul, then so can he or Elton. He means, since he is really dead, everyone should mourn for him. John had given me the band out of obligation and guilt. Paul's fears of being sacrificed and replaced now rang true. Since the McCartneys chose me to replace Paul, John knew that there could be no more Beatles without me. Since I required the band to enter into the agreement, it was all John could do. John told Elton and Bernie of the McCartney yearnings to have me fill Paul's role. By making me their Paul, they did not so completely lose their own son. They grafted me into their family tree, giving me new family roots. That is why, in Grey Seal, Elton sings that my roots were twisted. Also, in that song, he sings of something enduring at the core of Paul, his spiritual essence that continued in me, keeping life going. I was reborn before all life could die. He compares Paul's continuance to the great phoenix that goes in blazes but returns again to carry on anew. I am flying high with the wings of the phoenix. If Paul, inside of me, can fly, now so can I. The phoenix bird will leave this world to fly. If the phoenix bird can fly, then so can I. Dying in a car fire made that image particularly apropos for Paul. Bernie and Elton also suggest that if Paul flies what I can do in his name, then they should fly as well. I am less than Paul, they had supposed, but the two of them playing themselves without a phoenix required to exist through another gave them an advantage, or so they wrongly reasoned. Or, to put it another way, Paul is the sun. I am merely the image of the sun. The real sun is brighter. Paul flies by me, carried high by the bird, which is harder to do well. Since they are the real stars, or suns, and not mere images of the stars as they saw it, if I can fly, they can too. I don't appreciate the suggestion that I'm not equal to Paul. I excelled him musically, physically, financially, as a humanitarian, and in family life. Don't tell me that I don't measure up to Paul. I was a better Paul McCartney than he ever was. I'm not inferior to him in any way. I do not mean to sound ungrateful for this opportunity, but you can simply X out any notions of him being brighter. I gave him credit for my hits, which fans thought were his best.